G'day folks, ZiggyD here, and let's talk about the upcoming action RPG WOLCEN. Launch is about a day away, and I've been playing the latest pre-release beta to learn a bit of the game's mechanics and get some insights into how the game is shaping up. Now, I played the original alpha and early beta years ago, and, well, to be quite honest, the early prototypes for the game did not do a lot to inspire my confidence. After going back to check updates a few times, I was almost ready to write off the game as a non-starter. It was, quite frankly, a mess. It seemed to lack direction, and not a lot of progress was being made for a long time. The Kickstarter had some cool ideas, sure, but I wasn't confident the devs could do what they set out to do. The good and bad news here from the current beta is that the original game was pretty much completely scrapped. Some Kickstarter backers are not happy about that fact because some of the original ideas do not look like they'll be making it in at launch. That said though, it turns out that the current game you can play in the beta right now is really freaking good. A big surprise to be sure. I went into the beta yesterday with sub-zero expectations and I was kind of blown away. The game is super pretty, it has some pretty bangin' cutscenes, almost good dialogue, and skills and combat are really chunky with lots of spectacular visual effects and really meaty sound effects. I've put in a solid 15 hours now to this pre-release beta, and if the launch holds to this quality and expands upon the game, it could end up being really quite good. The game is most similar as far as action RPGs go to Diablo 3, both in aesthetic and in gameplay. I think that's quite obvious. In some ways, it even looks better than Diablo 3 does right now, which is impressive given that it's an indie dev team at the wheel. The production quality here is just way beyond what I expect from an indie action RPG. The best news is that while the playstyle and aesthetics are very similar to Diablo 3, the technical mechanical depth of the game is greater than what you'd get from Diablo 3. Skills can be modified with a variety of runes that enhance or change the functionality of the skill. A fireball, for example, can become ball lightning, it can be turned into one big piercing orb, or multi-shot with specializations for ailments, damage, AoE, and crits. This is not too dissimilar to the rune system from Diablo 3, I guess, with a little bit more meat to it. To add to that, however, there is a passive skill tree that has a decent amount to offer in terms of build creation. There's a spiderweb network of passive skills to boost a variety of stats, and then a good selection of major nodes that provide larger boosts or change the way your build functions in some way. Like for example, providing buffs and debuffs triggered on blocking, damage conversions, mechanical changes to ailments, and a bunch more to refine or alter how your build functions. There's a cute gimmick with the skill tree where you can rotate each of the rings, which gives you a little bit greater control over your pathing options. There's 2 rings of passives in the beta, and the launch will have a 3rd outer ring that'll give more choices of keynodes and passives to invest into. Gearing is not disappointing either. With the game's visual and gameplay similarities to Diablo 3, I was ready for a pretty basic set of item affixes here, maybe with some green damage numbers. But it's rather more nuanced than that, with a good variety of item bases that have impactful implicit modifiers, and random affixes that give you a wide selection of ways to scale various damage and defensive aspects of your build. There's a lot of item slots, and yet the game still manages to make each of those slots provide meaningful upgrades for your build. Legendaries in this game are randomized rares with extra affixes, basically a higher power level rare to chase after, which will likely see a fair bit of use from the looks of things. And there is a unique tier as well above that provides developer-crafted thematic items. These are a mixture of simplish, this item is good for X type of build items, and also more nuanced build enablers like a 2-handed sword that allows the use of lightning spells, something you cannot normally do. The biggest things that really stand out as unique about WOLCEN, however, are how the resource system and the weapon system work together to promote builds like hybrid melee ranged and spellblade playstyles. Let's break down this part a little bit because it's really quite cool. So the resource system has willpower and rage. Typically a spell build spends willpower to cast spells and then tries to generate more willpower. And then typically an attack build generates rage to then spend on attacks. Where it gets interesting is that the 2 resources are intrinsically linked. Spending willpower generates rage, and generating rage spends willpower. So what that means is that you can use a spell to dump willpower and then a rage spender to dump rage, thus allowing you to generate willpower back. And so, you have a spellblade. I can cast Arc Lightning, dump all of my willpower, and generate rage very quickly, so that I can then cyclone or rend away that rage to begin casting spells again. Further expanding this concept is the way weapons work with skills. Ranged skills can only be used with bows and pistols, and some with daggers. Melee skills with melee weapons, shields, and daggers, and spells with staves and catalysts. You're normally locked out of using spells if you dual wield swords, for example, or go sword and board. However, you can use a sword and a catalyst, which enables spells and melee attacks on your build. Something that's really cool is you can use a pistol and an offhand sword or shield to enable ranged skills and melee attacks together. The game also has one of the best implementations of melee ranged hybrid attack I've ever seen. When you use a pistol and a sword dual wielding, you will automatically use a pistol shot or a melee swing depending on the proximity of the enemy seamlessly. And if you use a shield, you can use a melee and ranged skills with the shield enabling the melee skills, and your default pistol shot turns into a shotgun blast. It's a really cool and super sexy way of making comboing different weapon categories together quite meaningful. Overall, I was just really impressed with what I've played in the beta. If the game at launch is more of this, with multiplayer and crafting and other systems expanded like is said to be planned, then it's going to be a really solid action RPG. However, here's where I should temper your expectations. The current beta has probably less than a quarter of the game's content in it. A lot of what's coming to the game at launch is untested and as of yet even unseen by the player base. There's a ton of promised content and systems that have never had any hands-on time. Like for example, the entire crafting system is just not in the beta right now and is coming at launch. I would say that it's extremely likely that there are going to be bugs, and probably a really huge amount of them. Add to this fact that while the game has offline single player, launch will come with online server-based multiplayer, and the game is picking up a lot of interest from the action RPG community, so I also expect server difficulties. I mean, what semi-popular online game has ever launched without them? So right now, while the beta is really quite good, there's a lot of unknowns and potential issues that could show up at launch. It would in the end be a really big surprise if it all goes smoothly. I mean, I really hope it does, but I wanted to make sure to temper some expectations here. You might want to play it safe and hold off on buying the game until it's had a chance to prove itself at launch, though awkwardly the game is cheaper to buy in beta and the price is going up at launch, so make of that what you will. If the game does pan out at launch, expect some more content from me though, because I'm really liking what I've seen in the beta. There's a fair bit here about the game that I'd be excited to make guides for example. But anyway, that's it for my current impressions. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.
You owe me an explanation. Let's go, let's go!